Yeah, it's on.
That's good.
I want to clear my throat.
I just gotta say that
Let's see if it
today
happens.
is December 3rd, 2001, and we're gonna chat this morning with Edna Bigelow. We're at the Rutland Historical Society. I'm Irene Amston, the curator, and Edna knows lots and lots about North Rutland. And I'm gonna just see if we can jog her memory
Okay.
of days gone by. You lived, I'm not going to ask you how many years you lived there, because I know you lived there all your life.
Yeah.
And that might be a secret that we don't want
Doesn't
to
make any
share.
difference to me.
How many years have you lived there, right there?
I've lived there 82 years.
Ah, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. In the same house, and I know that we did that house in our Foundations of a Town book. And I'd just like to know what you remember about when you were little. For one thing, like what you played, what you did for entertainment.
Well, as you know, we lived quite a ways from town, so we had to entertain ourselves. At night we'd all get together and play cards, and usually ended up in an argument, and then the cards were put away. But I remember going to the school down in North Rutland. There was, I think, 6 grades, I'm not sure. And they were all in one room. And I was by myself to begin with in the 1st grade. But then my brother Everett and Clarence Strong stayed back. So they were in, so there was 3 in my 1st grade. And we used to go by horse and buggy, would pick us up and take us down. And then in the wintertime it was a sleigh, but it was pretty cold. You know all about the school anyway.
Well, I think the school was interesting, the one-room school. That in this picture, is that anyone, can you see there's someone standing there? I often wondered if it was someone that, you know, was going to school. It's a little picture there.
Yeah, it is. Could be the
But,
teacher.
well, it could be, yeah. It's just interesting. All of those schools looked alike.
Yes.
And that one was there until 1928. So you went there and then you came uptown?
The 3rd grade.
In 1928. That's interesting.
Yeah. And that we drove, I think Clarence had like a, you know what that van looked like up at the store they were selling?
Oh yes, that old, what year was that?
That was a
35. Oh, yeah.
35, 37.
Yeah.
Like that. So we rode in the back and we
Oh, wow.
freeze to death in the wintertime. And when we came uptown, it was Miss Ward was our teacher.
Oh.
And of course we were way out of space because we didn't have the instructions they had up here. Yeah. Well, how could one teacher serve 6 grades?
So you were all in one room.
Yes.
Do you think that helped you, I mean, to learn?
No.
It didn't at all. You'd think you'd hear the older children.
Yeah, but you take 6 grades, they didn't have much learning, really, in a day when you take 6
With
grades.
one teacher.
Yeah, with only one teacher.
Wow.
And of course, if you wanted to go to the bathroom in the wintertime, you had to go out into the entryway, put on your coat and your boots and everything, go around outside.
Oh my, that wasn't
We went
pleasant.
it was right out back here.
Oh my, that must have been a little.
Girls on this side and the boys on that side.
And they were like outhouses? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were outhouses, huh?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting, huh?
But
And
Miss-
books, did you have a lot of books? Or?
not too many.
No.
No. We had a lot of penmanship. When the other
Oh, yeah.
classes were in
Yeah.
class, we were supposed to do our circles and
Yeah.
that stuff.
So you were a good writer as a result, huh?
Not really. And let's see.
I was wondering about that store that, now Clarence,
Oh,
was that
yes.
your brother's store?
Yeah.
Or your
But
what was it, the red and white
mm-hmm.
in North Rutland?
Yeah, he
And
took over after Mr. Corden, I think his name was.
Cotting, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Joined it first. And then he took over, and then of course when the mill left, everything left North Rutland.
Yeah, now that was like was that the Moulton Mills? Yeah,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
was there too.
They had their own mill houses for the people.
For people to live
Oh,
in.
yeah.
Are any of those still there?
No, they're down in, it was down into Vale Road on the, as you come off 68 on the left-hand side. So MDC took all that,
Oh, and they took all those buildings
all those
down.
buildings
Yeah.
down.
Were they like duplexes?
Oh, yeah.
A lot, because a typical mill house that you'd see in New England,
Yes,
a lot of the towns have
a
that.
lot of them had
Yeah,
3 or 4, you know.
yeah, in a row.
People.
Yeah, interesting. But did your brother, he sold everything in
the
that
grocery.
store for the whole of North Rutland and
Mhm.
anybody else, I suppose?
And he had the gas station too.
Oh, yeah.
And then our church was over on River Road.
Oh, yeah, they have
There's a
another
little
about that
chapel.
Yeah.
And of course, they had the Sunday services, and then special occasion, they'd have parties for the kids. And,
Was that just for North Rutland or?
Yeah.
Just for the
Just
people in
North
North
Rutland.
Rutland? Was it a particular denomination
I
or?
think they called it the,
I know there's a
it's
few,
either the Baptist or the Methodist, I
there's a
don't know
few
what.
newspaper articles in here and it just refers to the North Rutland Chapel.
Chapel, yeah.
So I just wondered, you know,
Maybe that's what it
it,
was, the chapel.
you know, it just,
Yeah.
but it was just for the people there, huh?
We
Yeah.
didn't have any minister per se, they'd come down from Hubbardston.
Oh, the minister would come from
Sometimes
Hubbardston.
from
That's
Hubbardston.
interesting.
We always had a visitor.
They had a ladies' aid society.
Mhm.
Did your mother belong to that, do you think?
Well, she must have,
Yeah.
Eileen belonged to it too,
Oh,
Raymond's wife.
Yeah, Eileen Bigelow, yeah. And they had entertainment and
Oh,
they,
yes.
you know, it sounded like they had a
They'd
good
have
time.
suppers and
So that was their entertainment
Yes.
too, I suppose,
Yeah.
huh? To have their own little church
Church
group
group.
and instead of having to come way uptown
Mhm.
to the church. Yeah, that's interesting.
it was,
Because this is early on, these articles are in the early 1900s.
oh, yes.
1921, 1906, that chapel was there.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. And it's too bad there isn't anything there at all. I think it'd be very hard to locate it.
Yeah,
There was a cellar hole, but
Hmm.
I don't know.
but it was like on River Road.
River Road was
Yeah.
on the left-hand side.
Uh-huh.
River Road wasn't down too far. I think probably where that house at the corner there, probably where his land goes,
Mm-hmm.
that was probably from there down a ways was the chapel.
Oh, that's interesting.
Wasn't down too far.
Will the MDC take that too, do you think?
I think they must.
Probably, because that's the Ware River that goes
Yeah, but
along
there's
there.
houses on that side, so maybe they didn't.
Oh,
I don't
maybe you
know.
just got told that.
That's probably it.
Now, did a lot of people in North Rutland work at the mills?
Oh, yes.
I mean, that's what the main thing was.
It was in North Rutland.
Did your family work there?
No.
Nobody in the Bigelow family did,
No.
huh?
Because my father had the sawmill, so a
Oh,
lot of
that's
them
right.
worked for him.
That's right.
And then, of course, Raymond came up to the vets. When Clarence had the store.
Could you kind of go down your family, starting with the oldest, and just remind us of who?
Raymond was the oldest.
Oldest, yeah.
And then Clarence had the store.
Mm-hmm.
Then Herbert always had trucks,
Oh, yeah,
construction.
construction, yeah.
And Ernest worked for the lumber company for a while. And then he worked the old CNES uptown here.
Oh, yeah,
And then,
the sanatorium.
yeah.
I remember him running the store.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
Clarence came uptown with the store, and then Ernest worked for him. So that was Ernest. Then Myrtle was a nurse. Myrtle was a office bookkeeper. And Marion worked at the store for a while, and then she went to work at Worcester 5.
Oh, yeah.
Charlie worked around for a while, and then he went to New York to work on the tunnel
Oh,
down there. And Everett did odd jobs around town. Then he worked for Herbert.
mm-hmm.
Then I went off of school, and I worked in the city. And then Milton and Everett both worked for Herbert.
Construction,
Yeah.
yeah, they built a lot of,
That's the family.
oh, that's very interesting, and they all stayed right
Right
around,
around.
except for
Charlie.
Charlie,
Yeah.
he stayed in New York.
Yeah.
But all the rest of them were right
Mhm.
around here.
Everett went down to New York for a while, but he didn't stay there very long.
Mhm.
And so they all came back this way, except Charlie. And, let's see. Then the MDC came in, but what I can't understand is why they didn't want Raymond's land. And they didn't want, Hastat's had a lot of land on that side. They didn't take theirs. They only came down the road a certain distance.
Isn't that interesting?
That was it.
Yeah, yeah. Because the Ware River runs right
Yes.
along Intervale,
Yeah,
and then it goes underneath, and it goes over to River Road.
Yeah.
And they took a lot of that, I
Mhm.
know, right around Intervale, and,
Yeah.
they changed it a lot too, the bridge and
Yes.
things like that, yeah. I know in this article that we wrote for, about your house, it told about the teacher walking down to see
yeah.
your mother. Was
Yeah.
that what the
Yeah,
teachers would
she-
do?
She would visit the different parents.
Parents.
Mhm.
That
She
was-
used to live with a Locke for a while. They lived different places.
Mhm.
I think it was Jesse Locke.
Oh, yeah.
It's where Bashaw's, on Davis Street.
On Davis Street,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, yeah.
And then there was a house up East County Road,
Mm-hmm.
the Lovrens.
Oh, yeah.
And she was a former Hestat, and some of them lived there during the teaching year.
And they would
They'd
board
walk.
there, they'd
Yeah.
live, board and get their meals, and
Yeah.
the people would feed them. Yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah.
interesting, yeah.
And of course, they didn't get very much at that time.
No,
so-
I'm sure they didn't. And would the teacher have to, as we read about, light the stove or whatever, heated
It was-
your,
I think Mr. Davis used to do that,
oh, yeah, from Davis Street.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the elderly man.
yeah, interesting.
And in the fall, he'd bring over apples and pears and things, and he'd put them out, there was a stone wall, and he'd put them up there for us to eat
Oh,
at
that's-
recess.
oh,
and
that's
things.
nice, yeah.
Yeah. And we used to get our water down on 68.
Mm.
There used to be what did they call it? It was like a trough, and the water came down from the hill
Oh, yeah.
into that. That's where we got our drinking water. And it was a good 10-minute walk from
Yeah.
school, so someone would go down, pick it up, and bring it up to us. And,
Do you remember that stone that's out on the common? It's got a dip on the top of it, and they said it was brought from North Rutland, from the school. I think they said, you know, it was
Oh.
kinda used for drinking for the
but that
animals
could have been,
and that, yeah.
down
and
there
that-
too, instead of a.
Yeah, it was just
There was a trough came down, it probably came down to that big
oh,
stone.
yeah, just as a natural place
Mhm.
for them to drink out of and get filled up again, yeah.
And, let's see, what else? We had a gum tree in the yard of the school.
Oh,
By the time you got it out of the tree, it was like pitch. You got it chewed up, it was just right to chew. You'd go into
Oh.
class and then you'd have to spit it out.
Oh, but
The
it
teacher
wasn't,
wouldn't let you.
a gum tree, is that
Yeah.
where, oh, that's interesting.
That's what we called it.
I haven't said so you weren't allowed to chew gum,
No.
so,
We had the,
but it was tasted like tar,
not really, it had a,
licorice or,
no,
no?
it wasn't a very good taste, but it was something to chew.
Something to keep you busy. You didn't have toys as such when you were kids, huh? Like hoops and,
No, at school, you had to make your own recess, your
yeah,
own.
would you play tag and
Yeah,
running
things,
games?
hide and
Yeah,
seek,
yeah.
and I remember they used to have a game that you would throw a ball over the roof of the school,
Oh,
and then whoever caught it had to see how many they could catch before you got around to the other side. It was all silly games.
but interesting.
entertained
Sure,
us.
It entertained you, right,
Yeah.
right.
And,
Did you have marbles back then? I remember playing with
no,
marbles. You didn't
nobody
have,
played with marbles
no, they were,
down there.
it wasn't a North Rutland
No.
thing, huh?
And if the boys wanted to be dismissed from school, see, the stove was in the front of the school, and then it had a long pipe for the whole length, and then the chimney went up. Someone would accidentally hit the pipe, and it would smoke up, so we'd be dismissed. But those were the days we'd have to walk home, because
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Harris came at a certain time to pick us up,
And if it was an odd
and you
time.
just had to wait walk home,
Interesting.
so.
Do you remember, like, did they start the day with prayer, or with the flag, or with the Pledge of Allegiance? Do you remember?
I can't remember.
I can't remember that.
See, I only went to the 3rd grade down there.
Yeah.
But it must have been like every school.
Yeah,
We
they
either
had,
a prayer or a
set
salute to the
ways, yeah,
flag.
they did, I know, in my old school, they would always start with a reading from the
Mhm.
Bible,
You
and,
know,
but I went to school in Worcester, and
Oh,
we're
yes.
trying to find out about
the country.
Rutland, the country, what they did out here. I'm gonna be in competition with the vacuum cleaner here, huh?
It's okay. Let's see, what else? Oh, Valentine's Day, May Day, May
May.
Day. We used to make May baskets and take them around to the different houses. And if there were boys there, they had to run and catch the girls, and if there was girls there, they had to catch the boys, you know. And it was fun making your own, made your own,
I don't think so, yeah.
own May baskets. All different colors and shapes, and it was
Oh,
really
that's neat.
interesting.
Probably is masking you out.
Did you shut it off? Do you wanna shut it off? Talking about, you know, what life was like, and, do you remember some things like of your home life?
Oh,
Did you
yes.
have a lot of chores to do?
We always had chores to do, and like the girls would have to make all the beds in the morning and things like that.
Mhm.
We used to do the dishes before we went to school. And then when we got home from school, I always wore a dress to school. But when I got home, you had to take off your school clothes
Oh,
and
absolutely.
put on play clothes.
Mhm.
And you've probably never seen me in dungarees or overalls, because I had to wear my brother's after I got home from school.
Ah,
So that came right up both through the years with me, that I'm not
sure.
gonna get any dungarees.
Mhm.
And then we would have certain things we'd have to do when we got home from work, do our homework first,
Mhm.
and then we had to do certain things.
Were there farming chores? Did you have cows?
I never had, the
No.
girls never had to go down. I never had to learn how to milk a cow,
Oh,
because it was boys, and
You had
my father
boys.
said that was the boys' jobs.
absolutely.
But in the summertime, because there was always a great big garden,
Mhm.
because my mother canned everything, and the only thing I disliked was the potato bugs. We had to go out and pick those all the time. And then when they did haying, everybody pitched in with that. The only thing I had to do was, they have a rake that they put a horse onto,
Mhm.
like a wagon, but it's got a rake in
In
back.
back of them, yeah.
And that's what I had to do. I had to go out first and put the hay in rows so that they could pick it up
Interesting.
but I usually complained because I had to be the first one out and the last one in.
Yeah.
But it was fun. And
Yeah.
then we always got a place to rest. And my mother used to make, and I wished I could written down, it was lemonade and ginger, I think.
Hmm.
And that would quench your thirst so quickly that
Oh,
it was,
yeah.
but nobody knows how to do it.
Ah,
So it's just one of those
secret
things.
thing, yeah.
Because so when she baked, it was always a handful of this or a pinch of that.
No
We got a
recipe.
few of her recipes, but not too
What
many.
kind of things would she would she put away for the winter? Like what vegetables?
Vegetables, beans,
And fruits?
yeah. Yeah, and we used to put eggs down when we had a lot of eggs at one time. They put
Oh.
it in a solution and put it downstairs for cooking in the wintertime.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then we always had pigs that
Mhm.
in the fall they would slaughter.
Slaughter, yeah.
And of course the salt pork and all that had to be put in a brine and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, our cellar was full of food.
Food, yeah,
Yeah.
for the whole winter.
And we
that's what meant.
always made our own bread. We had a great big bread mixer.
Mm.
And 2 or 3 times a week that was made. I think there was 10 loaves.
Wow.
And
And pies and
Yeah, and
things
she
like
was
that,
always
yeah.
cooking,
Yeah.
and she was always singing or whistling when she
Oh,
cooked.
isn't that nice?
Yeah. She had a little tiny pantry.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, everything was right there in her reach, but I can remember she had the regular flour barrel, one of those big ones,
Mm-hmm.
and then she had my father made a cover for us, so that's where she did her pies and everything right there.
Right there.
And, but what amazed me was, even now, I don't know how they did the baking, because it was an old stove, wooden stove, and she put a hand in to feel the heat. Yeah, that's ready.
She'd know when it was
Yeah.
ready, yeah, that's amazing,
And,
isn't it, huh?
But
And they made wonderful pies,
oh
didn't they,
yes,
you know?
yeah,
Now, did you have fruit trees there that you had to go pick
apples,
apples
yeah,
and?
things, just apples.
Pears and,
No.
pears and
Yeah.
things like
But,
that. Berries, you must have gone.
Oh, we had to go blueberrying and blackberrying and,
Yeah.
and all that, because she used to can them.
Yeah. Those things tasted awful good though, didn't
But
they?
now we have the freezers and we don't have to
I
do the
know,
canning.
I know. But you take for granted a lot of them. That
Yes.
was a lot of work.
Yes, it was.
I think it was just expected. I mean, I don't think,
The carrots we
They
used to
minded.
put down in sand.
oh yeah,
And,
yeah.
and,
They'd last a long
Oh,
time
yeah.
and things like that, yeah. That's wonderful.
the only thing I didn't like have to go downstairs for was the eggs, because it was kind of I don't know what kind of solution it was. I'm gonna bake today, well, who's gonna give me the eggs?
Oh, it was
Then
like
we'd argue about. I was the youngest and I was the one that had to do it.
something like the haunted house stuff, huh? So put your hand in kind of a funny solution.
We had, we had a stove in the living room and the kitchen stove. That's what heated the whole house.
Sure. Your bedroom was pretty cold.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Did you have those things that you heated your beds with, like a brick or a
We used to call them pigs.
pigs? Yeah.
They were shaped funny, you put hot water in them.
We've got one out
Yeah.
there in
Yeah.
in our tool section in the kitchen, but those would feel awful good. I can remember
Yes.
that when you didn't have central heating, you know. But how about Christmas time? Did you get a lot of presents?
No.
Did you? No.
No.
Probably just very
Uh,
minimal. Yeah.
We got a main present,
Mhm.
but what we would like, we would tell them. I wanted ice skates, so I got ice skates and then I got a few little things,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
to go with it.
One thing, well, that was
With all
good.
of us,
Yeah,
it was
sure.
quite a,
Yeah. A lot of times you get practical things like
Mhm.
maybe wool socks or something
Yeah.
that you needed or that your mother would make maybe too.
and, another thing they used to do was when they'd buy grain at the grain store, they used to have these, bags that were flowers and all that. And then
Oh.
my mother would make dresses out of them.
Oh,
So-
that's good.
I would have to go and make sure they got the right one for me. So that was different, but,
But everything was used, wasn't it?
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
You know, when you think of how practical
They had to
were.
be.
They had to be, sure, that's right.
I see probably when I was a youngster, Raymond had moved out and probably Clarence,
Mm-hmm.
because, Pauline is, I think 8 years younger than I am,
Mm-hmm.
so it's more like a sister,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. But Raymond lived across, did he always live across the street from you? No. I remember him living there way back.
Yes, they bought it, I don't know when they bought it, but, Finnish family used to live there, I think, Finnish, I think it was Finnish. I don't know the names of Kasunas, it could be most anything, but they were nice. They was our closest neighbor. We didn't have too many neighbors,
No,
really.
so you really were relying on yourself to
Mhm.
entertain.
Good thing
and to
there was
play with
kids.
yourself. Yeah, that's right, yeah, that's interesting.
So,
That's interesting.
but, then of course the, Army took over the prison camp, they go over there for practice.
Ah,
And, when the prison camp was there, we never worried at all about the
when it
prisoners.
was active.
Yeah, when it was active.
And that was the state ran that for
Yeah.
real prisoners, but you weren't worried.
No, no.
Once in a while, I know they would get out because read it in articles that they would be looking for prisoners.
But they always found them.
They always found them, and
Yeah.
they always brought them
Brought them back.
Yeah. And they had tuberculosis, those prisoners.
Some of them did,
Something,
they had the
yeah.
hospital there.
Yeah,
And,
but you felt secure having
yeah,
that.
and then you'd see them go by a horse and wagon, go
Mhm.
to pick up grain someplace or
Yeah,
something. They were the
something for the-
trusted ones.
Yeah,
Well, we never bothered us.
no,
I don't know why,
it's interesting.
but,
And that was there until the thirties.
yes.
Till the state, again, closed that down, I guess, but they were pretty self-sufficient there. and
Yes, they were.
Yeah. But did you actually go on to the prison grounds when you were young?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
because there was Phyllis Wales Currier.
Uh-huh,
She lived down at the corner there
oh, yeah.
of Shannock and
Mhm.
everything else. She lived over there. And I used to go down there quite a bit.
Oh,
And she was friendly with Burks. He was way up in the prison camp.
mhm.
And he had sons, and they lived, there was a house kitty corner to them up in the woods.
Mhm.
And of course, they had a pony that, in a cart that they used to bring over, we'd all go
Oh,
riding
that
in
was
it
a
and
big
things like that.
thing. Yeah, that's nice.
And,
I know they had baseball games with the town.
oh, yes, yeah.
And they would go there to play
Mhm,
on
mhm.
Ray Kimball and people like
Yeah.
that used
Yeah,
to go.
they used to walk over from, it was quite a ways from the prison
Mhm.
camp itself. Do you know where the Goose Cemetery,
Yes, yeah.
it was sort of in back of that
Oh,
that
yeah.
they played.
Sure, yeah.
And they'd all line up and walk over, and
Yeah.
it was, I wasn't too interested in baseball.
No, but it
But
was,
we
it was
went.
great for the boys.
Yeah.
It was entertainment, I'm
Yeah.
sure, to get you out, you know?
So,
I think that's wonderful.
But Phyllis was the only girl down in that area.
Mhm.
I haven't seen, she lives right here in town, and I
Yes, she
haven't
does,
seen
yeah,
her.
she's
Yeah.
not too well, but
No.
she,
No.
that's interesting.
But,
Did you learn how to do a lot of things like knitting?
oh,
and
we had,
You had
I
to-
did a lot of embroidery.
Embroidery. Makes me think about when I see your pretty sweater now. Did you make that?
Yeah.
From what you learned?
The only thing I ever made.
That shoots my theory of making all of your,
No, we used
of
to
your
do
own things.
pillowcases and things like that.
Yeah, embroidery,
Yeah.
yeah.
You'd have the material, and then you'd put the paper on with a design and put the
Oh, stencil,
hot
yeah, that's
uh,
interesting.
iron on it.
Sure.
And we read quite a bit.
Mhm. Well, I'm sure you noticed that Rutland has changed
Oh, definitely.
quite a bit, huh?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I'm not gonna say.
Okay. You're entitled to your privacy.
When I saw the new police building this morning, I drove out back to
Oh, yeah.
try to find a place to park. And I
Yeah,
thought, oh my gosh, it's
Yeah.
way out here.
I know. And that's one of the things, I mean, when we can't find a place to park here, we know that
Yeah.
times have changed
Yeah.
from years ago, and we have to accept that.
We
But
do,
it's
but Rutland's-
interesting to listen and hear about the good old days, as we
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
And they were much simpler,
Mhm.
and don't you think that you visited a lot more?
Oh,
Even though
definitely.
you may not have had neighbors, but like you said, you'd go to where
Yeah,
Phyllis
Yeah.
Wales would live.
and then up, down toward North Rutland, there was some girls down there.
Yeah. Did your mother too, did she have people she visited?
Well, she was kept pretty busy,
Well, I bet she was.
baking and
yes,
all
with all her
that,
children, yeah,
but
yeah,
she used to see the ladies too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
interesting.
And we used to have a doctor that would come to the house.
Oh, yes, was it Dr. Chamberlain?
Dr. Knowlton was one of them,
Mm-hmm.
but I know some of them went to see Dr. Chamberlain, because he was right uptown.
He was uptown, and I know he went out
Yeah.
to visit people, because that's what they did in those days.
Mhm.
And if
Oh,
you-
yes.
But I bet you had to be pretty sick before your family would call the doctor, because I'm sure you didn't have a telephone, did you?
Oh, we had
Way
one.
back, way back, I bet, you
Yeah,
know.
it was 2-1, 9 ring 2-1. And everybody on the line would listen.
Yeah, yeah, party lines, yeah. Probably had 4 on your line, huh? I can
Oh,
remember
quite a
having that.
few.
When I came to Rutland, that was very different. We didn't have that in the city, so.
And of course, we didn't have running water
no,
way back.
get
We
that.
had a pump at the sink.
Mhm.
and-
Yep. It was a lot of work,
Yeah.
just the same, getting the wood for the fires
Oh,
and
yeah.
the water
And have
and
to
bringing it in.
Pack the
yeah.
wood up in the shed.
Yeah.
If you didn't pack it right, it would fall over, go out and pack it again. Then was, we took turns bringing it in from the shed.
Mhm.
We had a wood box back of the stove.
Did you ever fight about it?
No,
No, it was just
we
was your
didn't
turn?
fight, it was your turn, you did it.
Oh, that's good to know.
And it wasn't one of these, wait till your father gets home.
Yeah, yeah, it was
be
just do
corrected.
it, yeah.
She had such a soft voice, you didn't dare
Oh,
do anything wrong.
oh,
She
that was
was-
good.
She's a wonderful mother.
The boys too?
Oh, yes.
They were always good, oh,
Mhm.
that's wonderful,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
The only time I remember getting a spanking was Everett's fault. We had some matches and we were down near the barn and we started a little fire. And of course it didn't burn very good, but they could see the smoke from the house. I didn't know enough to run and hide like he did. So it was my brother Herbert that caught me. And I got spanked.
Well, that was probably a dangerous thing, they were probably afraid.
But after they found out, they got home and being mad.
Did that teach you anything?
Yes, it did.
The moral of the story, huh?
Yeah.
But you always got along good with your sisters
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
I know you went to the Grange, was that a big part of your life, the
Oh,
Grange?
yes, after we all joined
You all
that.
joined
yeah.
that and,
That was very, very active.
yeah, how often would you do something in the Grange?
I think it was every other week.
Mhm.
And then they'd have visitation someplace else.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
a group would go. And,
Yeah, that was part of your life,
Mhm.
the Grange,
Yeah.
yeah.
and 4-H, they had 4-H.
Yeah.
And Girl Scouts, I was in that.
Mhm.
And all those things.
Yep,
We
but
had-
no television, of course,
Oh,
but did you
no.
remember radio when that,
Yeah.
did you used to
There was a
listen to
little
the?
radio and we'd
Yeah.
all,
Yeah,
quiet, the
Yeah.
radio's on.
yeah, you'd have to all be quiet and
Yeah.
listen.
But, no, we played a lot of card games, you
Yeah.
know. And then we had dominoes and things like that.
Mhm.
That goes way back.
Did you play whist? Remember playing whist?
Yeah, they used to have whist parties
Yeah,
in
uptown,
town.
yeah.
We used to go to those and pitch parties.
Parties,
so. But no, my family always bought in quantity
yeah.
when they bought. It wouldn't be a bag of flour, it'd be 5 pounds, 50 pounds
Yeah,
or 100
sure,
pounds,
sure,
or
sure.
something like that.
Well,
Well,
with their experience with the store too, I'm sure they
yeah,
knew how to buy and what would be good bargains, you know?
and of course we had our own chickens and everything too.
Oh, yeah,
That was one of my jobs, collecting eggs. So,
pretty self-sufficient down there, huh?
yeah.
Could take care of,
I can't complain about my childhood.
no, it was
It's-
probably very wholesome.
mhm.
Well, thank you very much, I really appreciate,
Well, you've got me at a weak moment.
and another time we'll think of some more things and we'll come back and we'll turn this on again. I think it's off, yep.
And you know, is it off?
Is it off?
This is the second in our series of interviews with longtime residents of the town of Rutland.
Our town residents. This morning, we have Nelson Calkins, who is a town resident. And we'd like to ask him a few questions, particularly about how long he's been here, which might give away his age, which he won't mind. And also, what he remembers about his childhood, his family. So we'll just start off with introducing Nelson Calkins. Junior?
Okay.
Junior. Tell us how long you've been here, Nelson, I know.
Well, I was born in November of 1920
Whoa.
down at the old Holden Hospital, which I think was on Main Street, wasn't it?
It was on Main Street, I think. I'm very sure.
Anyway, we lived on the Calkins farm on Walnut Street from the beginning. My father started out as he worked for my grandfather for a little while, but then enlisted in the World War I. And the end of the war, he bought 2 horses from the remount station at Fort Devens, and he rode one of them back to Rutland and brought the other one on a leash. And he bought a few cows, and he was going to be a farmer. I suppose he had some savings from the war, maybe that he bought the cows with. At that time, my grandfather owned the farm, but my father started to buy it. I think he paid my grandfather $10 a month toward
So your
buying
father
the farm.
was born here too? Your father was born in Rutland? He's a Rutland?
Yes, he and his 2 brothers were all born there at the house on Walnut Street.
Oh, interesting.
And his 2 brothers were Frank and Gordon,
Right.
Herbert Gordon, better known as Gibby.
Another story.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
So that's where we were brought up. And then in 1921, I believe, they started to build the Rutland Veterans Hospital, and my father went up there on the construction crew as a laborer, and then he got a job as a electrician's helper, and he found he liked electrical work. So he took a correspondence course, and when the hospital opened, he got a job and worked there over 30 years, and when he retired, he was boss electrician. So during the years we were growing up, the number of cows we had dwindled as his work at the hospital became more important, and but we always had 2, sometimes 3 cows. And when I was a teenager, I had to do the milking and the other farm chores and making hay, and in those days we pitched the hay up onto a wagon, and one time I was trying to get in a load of hay, and there was a thunderstorm coming, and one of these horses that we had from the remount station was named Kit. She was a very independent horse, and so she'd keep looking over her shoulder to see how much hay I was putting on. And this particular time, I guess I wanted to get it all on the wagon before it stormed, so I had quite a bit on there, and she's looking, and then I get it all on, and I try to get her to go in the barn, and she was acting like a mule. She just stood there, and here came the storm. It wasn't until it was a little thunder that she started to move. But by then the top of the hay, I think, got a little wet before we got it in.
Interesting.
But I remember that.
And you had what, 2 sisters or?
I had 2 sisters, Betty, who's just deceased,
Yes.
and she was 2 years older. She was born in January of 1919, and she was within a week of her 85th birthday when she died. And my younger sister Marjorie was 8 years younger than I. She was born in 1928, and she died in 1984 from a heart attack. So I lost my sisters.
Did you have fun? I mean, did you, with all the haying, did you have fun playing? Did you have games?
What?
and-
She had a girlfriend named Lillian Matson that lived down the road, and they were good chums. Lillian was a couple years older, and when they were playing house, they wanted me to be the husband, and I resisted vehemently, but they usually coerced me into being the husband.
It was fun, huh? Yeah.
And in those days, we made our own games out, you know, at the farm. What little time we had to play games, because after school we were busy with chores and so forth. When I was real small, one of my vivid recollections was of we had a little chicken house, and we had among the chickens a big red rooster. And so when I was about 5 years old, I suppose, I remember going in the chicken house one day, and this old rooster, he was feeling exuberant, and he was chasing me, and I didn't like that very well. After that, I carried a stick when I went in the chicken house
Days on
to
the
get
farm.
the eggs. So,
Rutland has changed a bit, huh? You'd say over the time, Rutland has changed quite a bit. You would say, huh?
oh yes, when we were small, it was, well, as an example, there were only 21 in my graduating class from high school, which is a far cry from the thousands that are graduating from Wachusett Regional now.
Right, good.
And most of the, I would say a majority of the townspeople were farmers, but during the 20s and 30s, the large number of sanatoria in Rutland were, in a way, a blessing to the town, because they provided employment for a lot of people. And so, even though the pay rates were low, they helped the town to survive.
That's right, yes. Get involved with your uncle. I know one had ice. What was down here, Calkins Pond?
That was when my grandfather came to the country in about 1890 as a young man, and his brother also, and they bought a steam engine with who became my grandmother's brother, actually, is who they bought the steam engine with. And they set it up for a sawmill. And I guess he earned his money in the early days when he came here with sawing lumber and so forth. And then I don't know if he worked at the farm on Walnut Street, or whether he just knew of the opportunity, but a man named Israel Keyes owned the farm at that time, and he was a prosperous man in Worcester, and I believe made boxes and did some other manufacturing. And when he died, his wife sold the estate, and they sold the farm to my grandfather, who had accumulated enough money, I guess, to at least to get a mortgage and buy it. And so he farmed for a little while. At that time, it was quite a prosperous farm because it had a piggery and several chicken houses and a carriage house. But his real interest, I think, was in the lumber business and also ice. And so in the early 1900s, without looking at the records, I think about 1910 or 12, I think maybe in 1910 he bought a mill building that had belonged to Moulton. Moulton had moved his mill to North Rutland, and so the mill on Palmagussit Road became available. And my grandfather bought sawmill equipment, water-powered sawmill equipment from a sawmill in Paxton, where the Pine Hill Reservoir is now. And when they created the Pine Hill Reservoir, it flooded the stream that's over near Anna Maria College. It's flooded the stream, so they had to close the sawmill over there. And he bought the equipment and sledded it over the ice of the water that was coming up in the reservoir and installed it in his mill here in Rutland. And then about 1912, he had the opportunity to buy the big pond across the street from the mill, in a house known as the Woodis House, the Highland something, which was at that time, before he bought it, they took in summer residents. And, so around between 1912 and 1915, along there, he moved the center of his operation up to the Woodis House, and then he built an ice house and started harvesting ice from the pond, which he harvested in the winter and then sold in the summer. When I was a teenager, when I got my license, in 1938 and 39, I worked for him peddling ice, and I had a little pickup truck that we loaded up the cakes of ice in the ice house. They weighed 200 pounds.
Wow.
So we loaded them in he had two trucks on the road. Hugo Alanovi sometimes drove one of the other trucks in the busiest season in the summer, and my father's brother Frank, he more often drove the daily, the other truck in the busy part of the season. But one time I was coming up Edson Avenue and I had a full load of ice, and I was just starting my rounds there, and for some reason I had to put the brakes on real hard, and however I did it, the load of ice slid backwards into the tailgate, and the tailgate popped open and all the cakes of ice went out onto the road. So I couldn't lift the 200-pound cakes, so I had to cut them all in two in order to get them back in the truck. But in those days, even though electricity was more prominent, a lot of people still had ice boxes, and
you'd put it right in their ice box, you'd put the ice, you'd put the ice.
You put the ice. They had little printed cards, and if they wanted ice, they put the card in the window to
With
tell
how
you
many
to
pounds
stop.
they wanted, I can remember that. Yeah, that's
And,
interesting.
At that time, most of the customers, a good percentage of them were summer cottages, because people in their regular house had maybe converted to a refrigerator, but in the cottages, they still took ice. And they were some farms, 2 or 3 farms that wanted ice for their milk coolers. And several of the beer joints wanted chipped ice, and you'd have to take a case and a cake of ice and chip it all up fine for them in their beer coolers.
Was that Wood's house ever a sanitary, a private stand for tuberculosis?
I don't think so.
No, I don't know why I thought
There
maybe
were,
it was.
there were people that came out from Boston and that area, and would spend most of the summer there. And even after my grandfather bought it, there were 2 families, one Italian family named Hocko and an Irish family named Sullivan, and the gentleman of the family worked for the fire department in Boston, and so they each got a month's vacation.
Oh, nice.
And so one came for the month of July and one came for the month of August. And Mr. Hocko, who was well, he seemed old to me then, he probably was in his 50s maybe, something like that. Well, he'd take me fishing out on the pond, and that was good because he had time to teach me how to fish.
Right. Is that where you would like skate, slide, things like that, like on this pond or down at the farm, or, I mean, you know, your winter activities, skating and sliding?
Oh, our winter activities were skating. That was one of the big activities, and I tried ice fishing too, which can get kind of cold, but if
But
you
on
combine
this
it
pond,
with
on the pond, Cockrell Pond, yeah.
you can combine it with skating, it can keep a little warmer. But my wife Helen loved to skate, and she was brought up in northern Vermont where that was a principal recreation, was skating. So, and we had a little, after I was married, we had a little pond down on the farm, and so we could skate. My children all liked to skate.
Okay. I had heard a lot about your maple syrup. I mean, did you do that when you were young? Did you help with the maple syrup? Because what they call that, what was the name of the place they called it?
Sugaring.
Yeah, but didn't they have a name for the farm too that was something to do with it? Maple.
Windy Maples.
Windy, yeah.
Yeah, that was
That was
one of our relatives came there, and he always complained the wind was blowing. And my mother finally came up with the name Windy Maples, and it stuck.
That went on a long time when you were young too, the maple syrup gathering, was that, did you do that when you were young?
Yeah, my father liked to do that, and he had set up a place in the Maple Grove, which was a little ways from the house. And we did it, I don't know, many, many years.
A lot of work to that, huh?
Then one time we were boiling the sap down, and when it got pretty thick, we'd bring it up to the house and finish it off where you could watch it better, because we didn't have a big operation. But we had this outdoor fireplace where we, right in the yard, where we had a little stone fireplace for outside suppers and stuff before they had barbecue grills and so forth. And we had a pan, maybe about that square, and about that deep. We were boiling down the last last of the thickening, and the pan had a leak in it, and it had been soldered, and the syrup, as it gets thick, the boiling point goes up, so it gets hotter and hotter, and all of a sudden the solder melted, and the syrup went down in the fire,
Oh.
and it burned, and it all burned up. that particular.
Dangerous. Interesting, I'll tell you. And I know you've done a lot of things in town too. You could tell us about some of the things
Well,
you've done in your history of Rutland.
When I came back, after I came back from the service, and I was working in this area at Barry Wilcombing, one day Jimmy Wood, who was a selectman, recruited me to, I think he had been on the school committee, and he became a selectman, and asked me if I wanted to run for school committee. So in the early 1950s, I ran for school committee, and I was on the Rutland committee for 12 years, and on the Wachusett Regional School. Jim was on the original committee, and then after I became a school committee person, they appointed me to go down there, and I was on the Wachusett committee for 9 years. And then after that, I was, well, I don't remember the exact order. I was on the planning board and the zoning board.
School building.
I think I went on the planning board when there was a fellow over at Upham's, what was his name, that drew up stuff?
Vanderpile. Vanderpile.
Adrian
Vanderpile.
Vanderpile, yeah. He was making a zoning map of the town, and there was quite a lot of pros and cons in the town about having zoning, and I was in favor of it. And I think that's when I probably got on the zoning board or the planning board, which I was on for a few years until, by then I was working at Norton Company, and as my duties down there required me to travel more, at some points I got off of town committees, but then I got back on.
And you weren't you on school building committee?
I
Did
was
you-
on probably 3 or 4 building committees.
Like,
I was on the building committee for the little elementary school behind the Congregational Church. That was the first building committee. And I was on the Wachusett Building Committee, and I was on at least one of the Wachusett addition committees, I think maybe 2 of those building committees, and I was on the Naquag Building Committee. It was when we finished building the Naquag school that we decided the old red schoolhouse that was vacated to go into so the kids could go into Naquag school, that the best thing to do was tear it down because it was structurally unstable, and so that's why the school committee voted to demolish it, and that's where our nice new library is now.
yes, and you were on that committee too, right?
Yes.
Library, yeah, and church work, I know.
Well, I was clerk of the works for the library. I wasn't on the board of trustees, but my wife Helen was on the board of trustees.
Very active in Lions clubs and the Lions Club and the church, and you very active man, right? You do a
Yeah,
lot.
when I had work, I was on National Society of Professional Engineers, and for a while I was secretary of the state state branch of the Society of Professional Engineers.
That was busy, huh?
And then I was president of the Worcester chapter for a while. But then in the 1970s, nuns assigned me to a project in Europe, so I was traveling to Europe for 3 years. I was out of the country 30 to 40 weeks of the year. And so I got off of most of my committees in town.
Very, very active.
Then after I came back, I was on the water board for a while before the town in their wisdom decided to do away with the water commissioners and assign the work to the DPW when they consolidated it. And then I was on the Board of Assessors for 10 years. So I finished that in 1994.
Goodness.
So
You've been
I've
a
been
big help
off
to us. That's great, yeah, that's wonderful, because I know you've dedicated yourself to, and your family too.
Then when Heifer Project bought a farm in Rutland in 1984, we became interested in the work they were doing as a nonprofit organization to provide animals to feed the disadvantaged in various countries, train them how to use the animals. It appealed to me from my early days, I guess. And since 1984, both my wife and I have been very active as volunteers at Heifer Project.
You went overseas for them too, didn't you? Where did you go?
I took one trip to Africa in 1987 to see the cows land at the airport in Uganda, and then visit in Kenya and Uganda and see some of the people that were getting the cows and how they Heifer had taught them how to build their little barns and how to plant the right kind of fodder to feed the cows and all that sort of thing.
Wonderful.
And so that was quite inspiring to see the good that had been done.
Absolutely, that's wonderful, wonderful. And you have children, how many children do you have, Nelson?
Well, I had 4 children. One is deceased, and I have one son living in San Diego and California at the moment, and a daughter living in Mesa, Arizona, and a daughter living in Rutland, and a daughter-in-law living in Rutland. And I have 4 grandchildren, 2 from my daughter living in Rutland, 2 from my deceased son and my daughter-in-law. They live in Rutland.
So
They're
we'll
all
be
teenagers now.
here, what, fourth generation or fourth generation?
Fifth,
Fifth
they're the 5th generation in
yeah.
Rutland.
Wow.
It's
that's
my
great.
grandfather, my father, me, and
Yeah, that's right. your
my
children.
daughter,
Sure, that's wonderful.
my grandchildren. So in the house on Walnut Street, there's been 5 generations
Oh,
of
that's
Calkins live there.
It's interesting. What do you think of Rutland now? Are you pleased with the growth, or are you
I
reconciled?
suppose I would say I try to be philosophical about it. I miss in some ways the rural nature. By the same token, through my life, I've seen the inevitable result of population growing, and people have to have a place to live, and as our society changes, the automobile, etc., has changed the way people live, and so now they find it, they want to enjoy the countryside. As a result, we're very popular, and
That's right.
the animals are losing out a little,
That's right.
but more people are coming. I would like to be able to preserve that part of the farm that I still own, and my wife and I are exploring ways to try and do that, but once you die, even though you may leave plans, you're never sure how they're
Yeah.
gonna work out.
It's an admirable thing, because that's what's gonna save us, I think, is some of the trust that they have, I think things have changed so much. I noticed we have a new market that's kind of going back to when you were younger, I suppose. Did you do all your shopping in Rutland when you were young? Do you think your parents did?
I think my parents shopped at Nellie Griffin's General Store pretty much, and the people at the store would deliver the groceries. And during the Depression, besides the small stores, there were all sorts of delivery people. Mr. Judkins had a fish business, and he would go to Boston and buy the fresh fish at the fish market, and you'd put your order in the week before, and he'd bring you your fresh fish. And then was Bill the fruit man, and he had a truck. It had curtain sides, but he'd roll up the curtains, and he had all this fruit in there, and he'd come around every week and bring you fruit.
Is that Rutland fruit? I mean, was it from Rutland, the fruit? No.
No, I
It was
think,
just
well, it was probably, some of it could have been from Rutland. Actually, for apples, we had an apple orchard, and we had barrels of apples in the cellar in those days, because the apples seemed to be better without spraying for some reason or other, and we preserved a lot of apples and made cider and so forth. But later on, through the 30s there, I think the Depression caused a lot of people to become self-employed, and then there was a bread man that came and delivered bread, and so for a lot of things we didn't have to go to the store. We had most of our vegetables my mother canned, and my wife canned, and later froze stuff. In the early days, when my father was around, my grandfather, they had pigs, and they did their own butchering, and I remember the butchering operation, and when they picked up the pig by it and hung him up in the barn, and then they had a big hogshead of hot water, and they dunked him in the hot water to loosen the fur, if you will, and then they scraped him down, and then they laid him out and divided him up into the various cuts, and I remember taking hams and bacon sides to in Worcester somewhere to a smokehouse where they also made sausage. You could take the scrap meat and they'd make sausage out of it. And even after I was married, I kept a couple of pigs for a while and a bunch of chickens, and but I didn't butcher them, the pigs. There was a local butcher that would take them, and at that time you could get him to do it, and then Ernie Bigelow would cut it up and package it for you, and then we rented a freeze locker back then in the 50s. Before you had your own home freezers, we rent a locker, and also, and by the same token, we would buy each spring 50 mixed baby chickens, and the ones that were females we kept for eggs, and the males, when they were about 8 or 10 weeks old, we butchered those and froze them and put those in the freezer too. So
I
we
know,
always had a garden.
Oh, yeah. You were
Still
self-sufficient.
do.
That's wonderful. And herbs, is it your wife that's into herbs too?
Oh, she does something with herbs, but not very much anymore.
Your mother was quite an artist, and I know I've seen some pictures of you posing for your mother's Valentine's or Christmas cards.
Both.
Both. Yeah, she's a good
Mother
artist.
had studied art when she was a teenager, just before she got married. I think she took a couple-year course in artwork, and she worked at the George Whitney greeting card company in Worcester when I was very young. We had a babysitter named Anna Cullen that would come and stay at the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mother would travel into Worcester, and she drew the pictures for the greeting cards, and I think the system was such that she could go in and get her assignments and then bring them home and work on them during the week, so she didn't have to go every day. Then later she got interested in making linoleum wood, like a wood block only on battleship linoleum, doing the carving, and for years she made greeting cards that way, but she never did it as a commercial thing.
Wow. Yeah, I've seen some of her work though. Very nice. You don't have her talents. You didn't.
Being colorblind, I never was much good at artistic work. And as an engineer, most of my drawing has been with a straight edge and a T-square.
Interesting. All right. This is wonderful. Anything else you wanted that you think of that we didn't cover or that you'd like to cover? You want to talk about Uncle Gibby?
Well, one thing, not about Uncle Gibby, but one thing about going to school in those days. There was the Red Center School, and later, when we were in the 7th and 8th grade, there was a separate school at West Rutland that housed the 7th and 8th grade. And before that, there had been 9 one-room or two-room schools around the town. But when I was growing up, they were just beginning to use the school bus, and a man named Mr. Tapley had the route where we lived, and he had a little Model A or a Model T truck, and it had side curtains and 2 little benches, one down each side of the back, and so he'd come around and pick us up, and in the winter time, when he first had that truck, he had 2 candles on the dashboard to act as a defroster. And that's how he kept it.
That's interesting.
He was interested in the winter time in those days. The way they tried to keep the roads clean, they were just beginning to get mechanized, and the town had a cleat-track bulldozer with a V-plow on it, but it took so long to go around that in the heavy winter storms, the snow would
Go ahead, keep going. Keep going.
the snow would blow in, and it would fill in pretty deep, and then even with the bulldozer, it wasn't powerful enough to push it out, so there'd be a gang of shovelers that went along with it, 10 or 15 shovelers, and they'd shovel a little path in the middle of the road just enough to break the tension. Then the V-plow could push it and open the road up. So we've come a long ways from that. In those days, they put up snow fences to help catch the snow so it wouldn't all go in the road. But now the plows are so powerful, they don't bother with that anymore.
Well, I can remember that big orange road grader that they
Yeah.
used to plow.
Yeah.
Yeah, up and down Prescott Street Hill. I
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah.
Learning all about Nelson, and did Nelson finish all the things that he wanted to tell us, or you got anything else? And we'll.
You'd have to probably suggest things, and I could tell you.
I really am very happy to know some of the things, and we may do another one, because I think that you've had a very full and colorful life in Rutland, and I bet you there's a lot of things you're going to go home and think about, so we can put an addendum
Well,
on.
that's why you would have to put a thought in my mind,
Sure,
and I
I
could
will.
talk about it.
But I
some
think for
particular
today
phase.
we've very much enjoyed this. We thank you, and we will probably do some more on this another time, because you
Okay.
have fascinating things to say, and we thank you very much, Nelson, very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. He filled in an awful lot of holes in my memory.
Yeah, I know, it's so nice, because are we done? Are we off camera here?
No, but we'll get off camera.
Well, I just.
On a street lined with stately old maple trees is Windy Maples, the family home, a Calkins family that Nelson talked about in his video. Windy Maples. A small, hand-drawn New Year's picture poem by his mother, Madeline Calkins. A sign in the window calling for ice delivery from the Calkins ice delivery people.